That's okay. Thanks. No, thank you. So we're going to start the recording now. Officially, we're in the patchwork workshop. We had a hard time maybe deciding what to call it, right? What were some of the other names we were thinking, like the grid, or what else did we think of?
Tracks. Oh, I don't know. It so many different versions, but yeah, patchwork just felt like it worked. Um,
Right, because I was saying too that I'd made like crazy quilts, right? So it's sort of the idea of putting like geometric shapes together, collaging, and it's I've kind of noticed it sort of start to evolve and come out of Athena's work a lot, like in the last 2 years, where she was doing more abstraction, and I thought that we were both at the same time kind of turning or curving ourselves away from using the figure, right? So using any type of feminine narrative or feminine subject matter being a face or a body. I've been doing that for most of my career, is working with the female figure. And for whatever reason, I just felt like I wanted to put myself out there and see what I would do and what I could do without it, right? So that not that the work wasn't feminine anymore, but it just didn't have like a woman, right? A woman's face or body in it, right? So I think in Athena and I kind of started that around the same time.
yeah, probably like 2 years ago for me when I mean, I still work with the figure, but it hasn't really been as prominent in what I do the last few years. Yeah. But I think our work still very much feels like us, even though the subject matter has changed. Like I can look at your work, Leah, and be like, that's definitely Leah, even though, maybe it's a little less photographic and more painterly than it had been like a few years ago or when I was working with you in your studio back in the day. But yeah, I don't know. It's all about evolution and
well, I think your style is your style. Those are like sort of your artistic choices, your color palette. And one of the things that is very distinct about Athena's work, I would say maybe more than my work, or I think maybe more than my work, is her color palette and her sense of minimalism. So I think that's one of our major differences. Is I would say that I'm a maximalist and she's a minimalist. But I've always been curious about the minimalists. I've always wondered, how they get away with that. Like literally, that's always like that's my attitude. And I think that's a bad attitude, but I don't mean it in a bad way. But it sounds bad, like. But I do ponder that, and then I think when I ponder it more and more, I start to think that actually holding back and putting less in a piece, it actually takes more restraint. It takes like more control and more sort of intention than adding. But I don't want to like say one is better. I just think they're different, right? So and that aesthetic, like what it's going to look like at the end. I definitely love to look at Athena's work, and I like to draw on the empty spaces. And what empty spaces mean to me now is they leave more room for the viewer's imagination, right? So more quiet. And I, especially during COVID, have been craving, more quiet space in the work where I don't want like every square inch of it to have chaos or action. Do you want to do your slideshow?
Yeah, let me can I share my screen?
I'm gonna actually pin you. Okay, so I'm the host, so at certain times you guys are just gonna have to negotiate, how I handle the screen. So you are now pinned, meaning you're the biggest, and I think I can make you the host, or did you send it to me? Do you want me to show it?
I thought if I could click through it, it might be easier, because there are some that I might go kind of fast through, and then some I might talk a little bit more about. But however we have to do it. I see the little share screen option down here at the bottom.
The host. So you are now the host. That means that you are in control. You're driving the ship.
Okay. Yay! Here we go. See what happens here. Okay. Can you guys see that?
I'm gonna turn my video off for a second, you guys, because I'm just gonna eat something.
Okay. So I'm I'm Athena. So like I said, I live in Barrie, Vermont, which is central Vermont. In addition to working with Leah, I work at a nonprofit art center and gallery, Studio Place Arts. So that's the building on the left. I also have my studio space upstairs on the 3rd floor. And we've got about 15 resident artists who have studio spaces here, which is really wonderful. It's really great to have that artistic community, people working around you and with you. So I made a little video to give you guys a little tour of my space since we can't be there in person. I share the space with someone else, but this is my little area. We kind of have like a partitioned wall. It's not normally this clean, but I just, at the beginning of the year, needed to sort of take everything off the wall and start from scratch. So I've got my little collage table over here, and then my hot plate and the table that I do all of my waxing on. Usually the table's super messy, but I just put down fresh cardboard, and new year, fresh cardboard and paper on my table. So I thought I would start off by sharing my recent work. This is the body that I've been working on probably for like the last 2 years. And then I thought I would talk about how I got here and all of the different, I guess like the evolution of the work, pretty much from when I started working with Leah and she introduced me to encaustic to how I got to where I am now. So I've been focusing primarily on the abstract geometric encaustic collages, working mostly with recycled and vintage papers, and encaustic medium. I don't use, unlike Leah, she uses a lot of the pigmented waxes, but I really like my wax to be more of just sort of like a skin over top of my collages. So I don't use any of like the little pigmented briquettes or anything. I just use beeswax and the Damar resin. I started doing some experimenting, making more 3-dimensional collage work. I like using just found bits of wood. My husband does a lot of woodworking projects for his job, so he always brings home some fun little scraps for me. I like to save little bits from home renovation projects. But yeah, primarily I just work on wood panels. Let's see, here's a couple of examples. I like to create compositions that are complex, but also kind of calm and soothing and structured. So it's all kind of about that balance between finding visual flow, but also keeping the compositions like dynamic enough that you don't get bored with them, but still I want things to be clean and structured. And it's interesting when you're working primarily just abstractly, you don't really have a subject matter to kind of tell your story. So your shapes, your colors, they all kind of become like the key players in telling your story. So I started off, like Leah said, I was at the Art Institute of Philadelphia. My major was photography. So these are some of my early photographic works. I was always really interested in form, like geometric shapes. So I would love to walk around like urban and industrial areas and just kind of capture all of the different shapes and shadows and line work. Yeah, really just focusing on flattening out my composition. So it was all about form and color. And I didn't really realize it at the time, but making my photographs kind of felt very much, I guess, mentally like the process of collaging, but instead of rearranging shapes on the panel, I was sort of rearranging my body and my viewfinder to kind of create these shapes within the frame of the camera. So I met Leah, like we said, around 2008. She was my professor at the Art Institute of Philadelphia, and I was just about to graduate. I think I had one more semester left, and she was teaching a special topics class. And the subject was encaustic and collage. So I fell in love with wax immediately. It was so different from what I was doing photographically. I was working mostly digitally with my photographs. And so wax is messy, you can get your hands dirty. It was a challenge. I really loved every little bit of it. So my early work was with vintage photographs. Whenever you're learning a new medium, I think it's a little scary and overwhelming to not only learn the medium itself, but also then, you know, figure out what you're going to do with it, what your subject matter is going to be. So working with these old photographs just kind of made sense. I knew photography and I could just focus on what the application of wax was really going to do to them. And then my work started to become a little more about these shapes again. And soon it started to feel like the geometric shapes were almost maybe more important than the figure in telling my story, until finally it sort of just felt like I was really, really excited about creating these shapes and these collages, this mark making texture, and the figure, the photographic figure started to be maybe more secondary. And then one day I decided I was just going to be brave and get rid of the photographic figure completely, which was a little bit scary because that was always sort of the element that grounded my work. It was like a starting off point, and then I would build up around it. And so I decided, okay, well, I'm going to challenge myself to try to work without a figure and just use these different shapes and repeated patterns to almost be my new subject matter. And they started to feel like little characters almost. They were kind of telling a story. They were interacting with each other. They were creating movement throughout the composition. And so that led me to start to think, okay, well, what was the connection here between my current work and my work with the old vintage photographs? And I realized that I just love the process of collecting ephemera. I love transforming the old and making it contemporary and relevant. So whether it's the photograph, like the cabinet card on the left here, or for a lot of my abstract collages now, I will use old book pages, old sheet music. But yeah, it's all just kind of about repurposing the old and making it relevant and giving it a new life. Leah also talked a little bit about color palette. That's another kind of unifying element throughout my work. I can't seem to get away from using these like soft, earthy, muted colors. I love white and off-white. And again, I was realizing, okay, this is a common theme because my work that had the figure, you know, these were a lot of the colors that I was seeing in these old found photographs. They were sort of stained with time and wear. And it really just created a color palette that I really loved, and the look of, you know, sort of distressed things. So there's also a really great book I just wanted to mention. It's called Wabi Sabi for Artists and Designers by Leonard Cohen. I think this one excerpt kind of really, I guess, illustrates what I'm trying to do with my work, and maybe like if I have an aesthetic philosophy, this might be it. So it's pare down to the essence, but don't remove the poetry. Keep things clean and unencumbered, but don't sterilize. So kind of like what Leah was talking about, you know, working very minimalist in a minimalist style, you know, it's like knowing how to keep removing things, but not remove too much that you don't take like the human quality out of it. So then I thought the next thing I wanted to talk about was just inspiration. It's different for everybody, but I think it's important for us to kind of self-reflect on what it is that moves us to want to create. Sometimes it's just like a love of the medium. So, you know, I love wax. I love the smell of it. I love the texture of it. I love the mess. So that can kind of be your motivating factor. Also, I'm really influenced by place. My dad is Greek. So when I was a little kid, we would spend summers in Greece. And I think I just kind of absorbed the color palette, all the really beautiful, soft, warm colors of the stone and the earth. In a lot of ways, I feel like the wax, the texture of the wax, emulates stone. It's sort of polished but rough. Also urban environments, which is kind of funny that I moved to Vermont from Philadelphia, but I still feel like I really love cities and man-made structures. So the image on the left is a snapshot that I took of a sidewalk. I think it was in Athens when I was there a few years ago. And I just thought it was really fascinating that, there are all these tiny little geometric structures. And then skip forward a couple of years, I created the collage on the right. And it wasn't until I was like just randomly scrolling through photos on my phone that I found this snapshot of the sidewalk. And I was like, oh my gosh, I just made this piece. So I think, it's really important to realize that we're kind of absorbing everything and it's coming out in our work. And sometimes it's interesting to kind of just analyze your work and review it after the fact and realize, oh, there's connections throughout each of my pieces to, different things in real life that have influenced you. With photography being my background, I also always like to kind of either have my camera or my phone with me to take snapshots of just like random street scenes. Yeah, always looking for like shape and texture in the real world. Leah brought up the fact that she sees a lot of like architectural structures in my work. And I think that's really interesting as this body of work has been evolving. I've been trying to realize just how influenced I am by cities, by urban areas. I love how different textures are brought.
May I ask a question?
Yeah.
Am I allowed to ask a question?
Oh, yeah.
Could you go back one, please?
Oh, sure. Mm-hmm. This one?
Yeah, the one on the left. Yeah, your art. That one, first of all,
Yeah.
You showed that before, and it has 3-dimensional pieces on it, right?
It does. Yeah. So basically, before I applied the wax, when I was collaging the paper onto the panel, I also was collaging little bits of wood. So these are just like little 1-inch cubes of wood.
Right.
And then I covered the whole thing in wax. Yeah.
Okay, so you collaged it on and then put wax on top.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And the pieces that you collaged on, did they have those marks on them before you collaged them on, or did you do that after you had the wax on?
That's actually after the wax gets put on. So I brush my wax on, so it's very textured, and then I use a razor blade to kind of scrape it smooth, and it creates some of these little imperfections. And then when I apply paint, it kind of gets stuck in all the little cracks and crevices, and then I wipe it all off and shave it all off, and then the only bit of paint that remains is sort of what's in these little crevices of the wax. So that's kind of another process that I use that I'll go over more probably tomorrow when we get to that point, to kind of create that sort of distressed look, that really kind of old worn look, which is kind of like what reminds me of, old streets or old stone walls or something like that. So yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Yeah. So I think these are maybe the last slides, but again, just kind of comparing architectural structures. So the image on the left is a photo I took of a building in Philly. I think it was like an old row home, and half of it was torn down. And so you could just see like the little traces of where rooms used to be. And it felt just like, I don't know, really powerful, like all these memories of the lives that used to be there. And I was realizing it kind of felt like I was creating, these patchworks with my own art. And each piece is kind of, special on its own, but really it starts to feel important when you notice the relationship between all of the different shapes and how they play out together. So well, that's all for me. Hang on. I think I can stop sharing. Okay. I don't know how to make you the presenter again, Leah.
I think I unhooked. Wait. I don't know. It doesn't really say. It just said hide. Are you still the presenter?
It looks like maybe.
Let me see if I can do something. I don't know. I got it back.
Okay.
I don't know. Okay. So any questions or comments on Athena's presentation? I mean, we're basically she's gonna make work with us over the next 2 days from beginning to end. So that's not going to be like it. Okay, there's all my finished work, and good luck figuring that one out. So she's gonna actually make work. We're both gonna make work, and I think what's gonna sort of start to happen, and it's gonna happen right now, is we're comparatively gonna approach the patchwork. So I don't have any geometric context or syntax in my brain. I don't think about squares or rectangles when I draw. That is like absolutely not in my wheelhouse. So I've read a lot of articles about the psychology of the artist and sort of like how do you pick your subject matter and like what do you make, right? Like so and especially now that I'm trying to become more abstract, and I've also and I think Athena just talked about this in her presentation, but I've tried to merge two mediums for the majority of my career. So I started out as a documentary film photographer, black and white photographer. I thought I was going to be a photojournalist. And when I was a teenager, I was leaving school after school, going to Center City and photographing homeless people, and then writing short stories about them. So my work was very humanitarian and very narrative. It wasn't until college that I realized that maybe I was interested in the female figure or using women to document women. I wanted to photograph women. And what began to happen to me was it became very psychological and emotional, that I wanted to be with women, meet women, hear about their stories, and use photography to sort of like capture that experience of getting to know them on a personal level and then make art about that. So not only was it about my narrative, but then it was about other women's narratives that I was recording in my head and learning and internalizing, and kind of pulling out the similarities between my emotional life and their emotional life, right? So if you read anything about my work, it basically says that I'm like telling the stories of womanhood or femininity through my marriage of these two mediums. I never felt like photography was enough. I never felt like just a photograph in a mat or a frame was completely describing all of my needs. And some of my needs, like Athena just said, were tactile, right? So I needed like another surface, whether you want to call it a skin or a layer. Like I needed a veil, right? Or like you know uh, um, an impressionable surface that I could mark on, right? And that need to mark came from maybe like my anxiety, or my need for self-expression, my need for like personalizing the surface, right? I also joke all the time that I was like a rebel, and not in like the bad way, like I was going and like fighting against people, but I often didn't want to, like, especially in photography, I didn't want to be stuck into I didn't want my work to be stuck into a square. Like I was like a circle, I didn't want to be a square. So I was always trying to like break out of the confines of photography and take risks. Okay, so my approach to wax and photography came from like risk taking, experimenting. I also was very attracted to the alchemy of the wax. Like Athena, you spoke so beautifully about the wax. I'm so glad that we have that recorded.
I love wax so much. It's wonderful.
I know, and I love listening to you talk about, what it looks like to you and how you feel it, and what it means to you and how much you appreciate it. It was really beautiful. And I feel I share a lot of those same feelings, like, and I really discovered it, by accident. I was very experimental with my black and white photography, and I was very into like all the different kind of tones and colors, very similar to Athena. Like I love light pink, peach, gray, brown, all the shades of off-white, all the shades of gray, black, right? Like umber, and those other colors like red and yellow and green and purple. Like I like them, but I'm still always like, oh my God, I can't believe, like, oh, is that too much? Like, wait, or I put it on and I wipe it off. And I totally love like really colorful, super vibrant work. And I'm like, oh my God, yay, woohoo. You're like, I commend you. Like, yay, I love it. But then I don't want to do that for myself. Like, I just don't want to be that person. I also really love the translucent layers, right? So, and I think, Anne, you were asking Athena, like, it's sort of hard when the work is finished to tell where it is, like, because you know it's layered because you're in this class and you all know or about encaustic, and you know a little bit about Athena and I, so you know that we're like, you know, peanut. I always call it, Candace, remember when I did the peanut, were you there when I did the peanut butter and jelly sandwich? So I've always tried as a teacher to think of like ways to like make it make sense. And then I was like, well, you can make a peanut butter sandwich with like bread, peanut butter jelly, bread. But guess what? You could also make a peanut butter jelly sandwich that was like bread, peanut butter, jelly, peanut butter, jelly, peanut butter, jelly, bread, peanut butter, jelly, right? So then the sandwich becomes like, it kind of reminds me of a Shel Silverstein poem, right? Where it's like not just a peanut butter and jelly, it's like, oh, hey, it's a peanut butter and jelly sandwich. So that's like one of the amazing, you know, things about wax too. And Athena, I'm so glad you showed those 3-dimensional pieces. And I remember when Athena made the first 3-dimensional piece that I had really ever seen. And then she was also like, she got into like hiding the board. And I was like, what? So for example, like she took a rectangle like this, right? And she literally built a frame on it, right? So the picture was inside here. Then there was a frame on it that lifted up. And then she put so much wax on it that the corners of the rectangle just started to disappear.
Yeah, I think that's one thing that I really like trying to do, and I try to challenge myself to make work where it's about an entire object. So it's less about creating a design and something beautiful, and then it's on a panel where the panel kind of feels like an afterthought. So I really like the idea of incorporating, you know, the edges of the panel, and I'll talk about like how I really like drippy edges, and it's really you're creating one sort of cohesive object, not just necessarily an image on a board that then goes on your wall. So I like it feeling, you know, just very cohesive like that, like Leo was talking about. Yeah.
I'm just going to replace our pin. So I don't have a slideshow, but I wanted to show you my influences and I'm one of the other things that I have done for my whole life is books, right? So I, from a very early age too, made journals, made books, put pieces of paper together, and collage. So my mom was a collage artist. You know, as a hobby, she was an English teacher, but she also did collage. So I have a lot of exposure and time spent with collage. So that was always something that was very just natural to me. And then, of course, as a film photographer, so the majority of my career was I shot 35 millimeter, 2.25, 4x5. Like I love the contact sheet, right? So the contact sheet is the grid, right? It's the strips of film, right? So that's also sort of part of my internal programming was learning to edit in a grid, right? Also to look at strips, right? And constantly just like I love contact sheets. Like I still to this day, like I think they're beautiful. Like I would be totally happy just making like huge contact, you know. And at one stage I made some for a show in college. I made a huge contact sheet and I was just like, loved the strips and I loved the repetition of the sprocket holes and the consistency. And then maybe there was like a little bit of dirt or water on the glass when you made the contact sheet. And then that texture also got onto the photograph, right? So these types of things, like very early on, were things I really loved about what I was doing in the medium. And I really, really looked for them. So I'm going to show you two artists that have inspired me on my grid. And I'm just going to give you a little bit of, and I'll show you pictures either later today or tomorrow, but I just want to pull them out appropriately before I start to show them. But my idea of a grid is not like I can't draw, like I don't have Athena's gift for like dividing the space. I also don't see the world. I feel like Athena has such a gift for reducing, it's like this ability to reduce all the information is out there and to find those compositions, like that beautiful photo she had of the pink wall with the beige rectangle on it. Like, I mean, I would see that and I would be like, okay, that's cool. But like, I might not take, that's not like my thing. But when she does it, it's like so beautiful. Or the way you photograph the stones on the pavement, I'd be like, oh wow, look how gorgeous that is, and like you made it into a work of art. It's like awesome. So my idea of patchwork comes into dividing my photo, right, and putting the photos together. So all of my art pieces, my encaustic pieces, start with a collage. And sometimes that collage is a single image, like glued onto a board. So I'm just going to technically call that like a collage. But then some of them, and I really try to push myself towards this work now, I'll take the main subject photo and I'll build a collage around it on the board, right? Or behind it, right? So that means that I'll do 2 layers of the collage where I'll put rectangles, like old letters or found pieces of paper. I'll create a base, which is something I'm going to demonstrate this weekend. Then I can take the subject matter, right, and I can put it over. And this style was actually inspired, and of course, it's not here. Wait, my book. Oh, here it is. This style was inspired from other artists, right? So I always like to look at other artists, and this is my. So this is, and I think Candace, I've showed this to you before. So this is an artist. His name is Tom Judd, right? And I love the way that he divides the space into almost like 2, like a diptych, right? Like 2 subject areas that are not really associated, right? There's another artist that I'll show you guys today too. His name is Paul Cava. And he also does the same thing. So he uses photography, but like you can sort of see here, like the sense of the grid, right? Because here's the landscape, that's a rectangle, right? Here's a rectangle, here's an old letter, that's a rectangle, then you've got a rectangle, right? And then he uses all of those rectangles as sort of what I call the background, right? The base, and then he puts these flowers or these other subjects on top, okay? So here's a really good example. I'm trying to find like the best one. I mean, this is another nice example of how he uses like that repetition, right, of squares and rectangles, and then along with these other 2, okay? I also, in my past, I was very lucky in my younger years, and I assisted other artists, and I highly recommend it. I mean, I don't ever think that you're too old to like learn, like most people think like, oh, assisting somebody, but working in the studio with somebody or learning somebody else's process, like really learning it, is only going to improve your own process. And you're not going to end up copying them because you can't. You just can't be another artist. So I highly recommend like studying, researching, learning, watching anybody's artwork that interests you, because you're just going to kind of like, feed your head with inspiration and technical ideas. And then guess what? When you get up to the plate, it's like you're still going to be you. You're going to still make your own decisions. You're going to have your own physicality to it. And it's like you're just going to improve maybe some of your problem solving skills, or give you, a push in a positive direction towards a composition, right? I mean, I really like to look at these paintings because I really like the way he divides the space and has a strong sense of geometry, but then also has a nice sense of sort of narrative and subject matter. So here's another great example of how he uses the geometric space as the background, and then he paints over it, right? So this too goes back to like maybe things that you like to collect. Like I did a painting for my show last year, and I actually collected or found these cloth gauzy squares. So I did a bunch of paintings where I did the entire background on the board. This is the first thing I did, right? Was arranged these squares. And then some of them I cut in half, which makes the square into a rectangle, right? So this became my base. I was very curious about a couple things when I did this. One, was how was I gonna like this color as a base color? Two, I was interested in the lines that it was gonna give me, in between each of them as I glued. And three, I was really interested in what was gonna happen with these little fuzzy strings, right? When I waxed it, okay? So, I liked the piece. Ultimately, I can show it to you. But like things like this, I like to bring into my practice and try. So, just so you know, one of the other things that I do with the grid is that I often make pieces that are larger than 17 by 22. And I only have a printer at home that is 17 by 22. So I use the grid, right? And the patchwork, very much like Athena does, like rectangles and squares. So I divide the picture up in Photoshop, right? At like 20 by 24 or bigger, and then I put it back together. Okay. So for me, the grid is much more about collage and puzzling. And it usually happens in my undercoatings and not so much in my top coatings or my drawing like Athena's, right? Because I don't assimilate, or I'm not drawn to those minimalistic shapes as my final art form. I am going to show you one other artist before I show you the piece I made. So this year, I wanted to really push the idea of patchwork or kind of crazy quilting. And I wanted to make a big piece of individual pieces of wood. So I made like a 30 by 40 wax encaustic photo, and I printed the picture in pieces, and then I divided each piece up on chipboard. So I literally put one photo on each piece, and then I puzzled, I painted each, and then I put the pieces back together. And what you had was those beautiful sort of irregular spaces between each section. So you noticed how Athena drew those spaces, right? She individualized and sort of handmade each of those spaces in the wax along with the collage underneath, where I was physically doing it by tearing the paper, gluing it on a board, and then putting all those boards back together. Okay, so I'll show you. I also wanted to show you another
question. Can I have a question?
Of course, yes, please. Oh my God, please. I love questions.
Okay. When you're taking the photo apart and then you're putting it back together, you're putting it back together as the photo was, not differently, right?
That's the best question. No, you could totally I totally put the picture back differently. Yeah, like I can show you a couple paintings where, like, especially with the figure, where I literally like under her breasts, and that goes back to Athena's work. Wait, I'm gonna put myself back on the pin. It goes back to sort of Athena's work. Like I just got to chill when you started talking about that, because I was like, Athena and I kind of have like all of these sort of like crossovers. So she would like cut out people's heads and then like just have the floating heads, where because I was putting the photos back together, I would like be able to cut at a torso and like elongate a torso, or I could put like secret things like inside a woman's body, in the rib cage, or people could be missing a limb. Or there could be, there's like cut their flower, like here. I just need a piece right there. Right. And then this is like reminds me of Athena's work, right? So like I cut her, I cut along this line, and I'm really a huge, because of all my sewing background and my crazy quilting and other hobbies that I have, I'm really interested in how you cut and the shapes that you sort of naturally cut with scissors. So I got really into cutting paper with scissors, and then of course, like, I was just randomly doing a presentation on Matisse, and then I read all about Matisse's paper cuts, and like for a month, all I wanted to look at was like Matisse's paper cuts, right? And what I love about that whole part of his life too is that he was just so resilient, right? And he wouldn't stop being an artist. And that was like the only art form that was like he was able to do. And of course, it was like beyond beautiful, right? So I always like to really encourage, cutting into a photo. And see, for me, you could see like how Athena might have cut this. I mean, I'm just using this as an example, but I mean, she might have cut it, in rectangles, right? Or she might have cut the face off completely, right? So whatever your intention is how your art is going to turn out. But that's a perfect example. So no, you could put the photos back together completely in the wrong order, right? So there's two ideas there. One is you put it back together correctly, and you just have sort of the beauty of the separation of the photo. Two, you mix and match. You put them, rearrange them completely different. Three, you maybe merge two photos together, right? You start to see how like any idea can sort of become this exercise, like, well, what else can I do with it? What else can I do with these shapes and how else can I arrange them? Right. And I think Athena and I are both going to talk this weekend about some of the techniques we use to sort of push ourselves to take more risks. And the one thing that I do is, there's a couple of things I do, but one is I use my camera on my phone and I lay paper out. Like I might just spend an entire day taking a bunch of prints and photos and cutting them. And literally I put them on the floor, on boards or possible arrangements. And I photograph them. And because I'm a photographer, it just makes sense for me to edit the way I've been editing since I was like, 13, 14 years old, right? So it's like, I mean, I didn't have a phone back then, but now I'm used to doing, I used to look at a contact sheet, but still I need I need a comparison. I can never emphasize enough to my art students that it's like, you don't know what this is until you have something to compare it to.
Yeah.
And I would hope that you're comparing to something else you made, not to something in a museum, but you could compare it to, like, if you have an inspiration or an artist that inspires you or a color or something that's like triggering you to make the work, you could say, yeah, this is what I love. This is what I made. How am I comparing them? And then maybe just make another one, right? So I'm always about like, don't be too critical, like don't overthink it, like just try to keep making work and learn through comparison. I want to show you guys a very important, this is like, there's certain art out there, and I hope you guys have this connection too, but there's certain artists and art out there that are just like the fingers on my hand. Like I wouldn't be who I am if I hadn't seen their work. Does that make sense? Because when you see someone else's work, it gives you permission, right? Or encouragement to sort of like go towards this, like go to the light. Like you get this feeling like that's amazing. Like I like love this artwork. It speaks to me. I get it. I understand this vocabulary. This has meaning to me, right? And it's like, yeah, I'm never gonna be that person. But I don't want to be that. I want to be me, but I want to like head towards the light. They give me the courage to keep moving and try things. Athena, you're nodding your head. Did you want to say something? Do you have a favorite artist like that?
I was gonna actually, when you were talking about photographing your work, I was just gonna say it's the best thing to do when you're feeling a creative block and you're just like, I have no idea what I'm doing. It helps you to just not be super precious about the the compositions that you're creating, because you can just take a snapshot of it, totally clear your panel, start over, take a snapshot, and then you can kind of, again, maybe it's the photographer's brain of wanting to edit photos and compare and contrast. But for me, it's like the best thing if I'm sitting in my studio and I'm just feeling a huge creative block. I'm like, well, it's not going to hurt anything. I'm not gluing anything down. It's not permanent. Yet I'm creating a record so I can go back and review. And then maybe I just realized I was having a bad day. And when I look at my pictures tomorrow, I'll realize, hey, that was actually pretty good. And I'm going to go back and recreate it and glue it down and move forward. So yeah, I totally encourage you guys to just play around with taking little iPhone snaps.
I think I see it differently. in a photograph than I do in reality.
Definitely, yeah. And even just playing with the scale of seeing it small, you know, versus seeing it in real life when you're not really getting the full picture, especially if you're working on like a large panel.
Right.
It's really helpful. So I'm really glad you talked about that, Leah.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. I also think that because we have like, you know, technology, we have all this technology, you have these iPhones, so you're able to sort of like take the picture and then go through, even run it through all your filters.
Mhm.
You know, especially take like something that's in color and run it and desaturate it and look at it, you know, what's going dark, what's going light, because what that's doing is basically taking it down to the essence of just its basic composition, right?
Mhm.
So it's sort of taking away all. And remember, we're always dealing I'm pointing at my forehead, but I always think of my forehead when I think of like my ego. I always think of like this part of my head, and I'm like, if I could just like take this part off, then I would like really be like just moving forward without so much judgment, right? So it's like this part of my head is preventing me from just like making art, right? Because it's the part that's like questioning, you know, concerning, like remembering a past experience or someone didn't like that painting, people don't like figure, like it's just all this sort of like what in yoga they call it monkey brain, like the monkey brain, right? That prevents you from just like literally being in the experience and enjoying the process and, you know, making art. All right. So the artist that I'm going to pull out today, I did mention Tom Judd. He is a Philadelphia artist. I think there's also a sculptor there's another person named Tom Judd, a famous one. So if you're having trouble finding him, he's Tom Judd, the painter. And he also does murals. He just actually did a mural in Philadelphia in a subway. And his subject matter is often historical references, like pictures of um, and the West, kind of like this sort of like nostalgia we have for American history, quote unquote, which we are now finding every day is maybe possibly not even slightly true. Okay, so always good to think about that, right? All right, I'm going to share my screen. So this artist I'm going to show you now, or these artists, they're actually brothers. Oh, you know what? You're the host still, Athena.
Oh, how do I change it?
I think you have to go to like my three dots and you have to say, go click on my picture and make me the host. You're the host, so you have the control.
Make host. Yeah. Cool.
Oh, now I'm the host again. Woohoo! All right. So here we go. So the artists I'm going to take you guys to are the Starn twins. So you know, you have to kind of remember where I came from. You know, and it's kind of interesting too if you think about it, because where I came from in my experience growing up as a photographer, like I met Athena, so she didn't have to go through like my experience because I was already going to empower her to be a unique individual, you know, freestyle. I wasn't going to tell her that she had to do anything, right? I was going to say I already broke all the rules and spent the last like 20 years of my life like feeling broken and kicked out of my genre. But these guys, the Starn twins, I discovered them probably in the 90s, and I was like, these are my people, and they were already like really famous, right? So they do a couple things. They did use encaustic, like this is one of their encaustic pieces, and they definitely divided the picture. Okay, so the division or the patchwork of the picture was fairly simplistic, right? But like in this one, you can definitely see how they kind of like moved the rectangles around. And maybe, and this is something that I do, is they take two prints, this is important, two prints of the same thing, and they mix and match the squares or rectangles so that one is lighter and one is darker. Okay. So that's a really cool thing too. You could even make three. So I am a huge fan of like trying the same photo with encaustic multiple times. Okay. So it's a lot about, you know, sort of this repetition, like even though my work is always turning out different, that's where I like to have control and then kind of bring all that control into that intuitive process. So it's not just all out of control, right? So I have control, 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 and then I can let go, right? So the let go part of the work is the wax, right? And maybe the collage, but everything else before that is like systematic control, control. So like this, I imagine they combined two different prints, right? So they have maybe one that's a little bit blurrier and they put those squares together. This one, they divide it into squares. You have these nice kind of like lines in it, right? And so this is done by ripping, like tearing apart the paper, right? And putting it back together. So very similar to Athena's work, right? Where you saw the spaces, right? I just think it is so beautiful. I mean, I think this is just a picture of like a hosta or something, a plant. And yet like you're so drawn into it and you really want to like sneak out in between these cracks, right? The texture is beautiful. You know, the softness of the image is beautiful. And then it also has this really interesting structure. Okay. This is like an example of their more recent work. And again, for me, it kind of goes back to that idea about like printing the same image in like all of these different colors, maybe like stripping it up and then putting it back together, right? So it's definitely like this same tree branch, right? This one or original photo, and then all these sort of different tones and color combos that they printed the photo, and then they put them back. Like, so it's about construction, deconstruction, and reconstruction, right?
And filters. You could use filters in Photoshop and do different filters and then divide
Right,
them.
that's exactly right. So that's exactly like what I have here, right? So this is like the same, photo, but like it's in, look, you know, what does it look like? Right?
Yeah.
Totally different tones. And I use Alien Skin, but you can get these tonal filters in Google. They're everywhere. They're on Instagram, they're on your phone, you know, but you know, when you put them all next to each other, you can really see, you know, the difference between blue, you know, blue and brown. That's just a little blue and brown, right? And then here's, you know, more gray, and here's more green, you know, and then here, right? And like these are very like Athena colors, right? Okay. So, and again, too, like if I was thinking about a patchwork piece, like I could do repetition, right? This is where you can start to think about all the possibilities. I could do repetition of the same photo, right? In a 3, right? And make this a piece, right? Or I can take this piece and divide it, right? And put it back together. Okay. So those are like just two very simple examples that both work beautifully, I think, with the wax. And also, like these are wax on paper pieces. We're going to talk about these today. But I definitely think you can glue these after you wax them. And I'm never afraid to wax paper and glue after. I don't know how Athena feels about that, but it doesn't bother me.
I think it's all just about experimenting and, you know, see what works for you. Yeah.
Let me see if I can quickly find this piece that I made with the puzzle piece. Hold on one second. It's in my Google. Athena, if you wanted to say anything, I'm just going to look for something for a second if you wanted to.
Oh, yeah, that's okay.
I'm going to pin you. Hold on.
Yeah, I don't know if this is a good time or if you wanted to wait a little bit. I did have another little, like a quicker slideshow that just kind of shows the different steps of my collage process. So
yeah,
I know there were some.
You can go right ahead.
Yeah. Okay.
I'm going to look for this picture of the puzzle piece I made. So you're the host.
Okay.
Now,
Okay, so moving into more technical process of the collage, I always do my collage work first because I like to give everything a lot of time to dry and make sure that it's, you know, permanently in place on my panel before I start to put wax on. So here's some of my basic materials that I use. I like Line Co's PVA glue. It's a neutral pH, so it shouldn't have any yellowing. I use just a cheap little brush and a palette knife to apply it, a basic razor, scissors. Sometimes I like a hole punch if I want some fun little circles. Let me see here. Oops, there we go. So like I said, I like to use a lot of found papers. I'm not about being, super pretentious with the materials that I use. I find sometimes like more basic and common materials I use, the braver I am with my experimentation. So this is, Leah talked a lot about breaking the rules. So this is one part of my process that I always get a little bit nervous about because I'm breaking the rules. I like to use cheap craft paint, a matte acrylic paint. And usually they say acrylic is not great for combining with encaustic because of the sort of very like plasticky, satiny surface. But I found these just cheap craft paints have a very like matte eggshell absorbent surface to them. So I'll use them a lot if I have old scrap paper or old paper bags I cut up and they're not the color that I want them to be. I'll just paint them the color that I want them to be. And then when I distress them, usually with sandpaper, something really lovely happens. So the color of the paper itself, which is usually sort of like a dark brown natural fiber color, will start to come through as I distress the paint off of it. I also love collecting scraps. So all the little scraps as I'm cutting my shapes, I have a bin that I kind of collect it all because sometimes, this weird little shape where I cut a circle out will be like super inspiring and will be a fun little accent piece in one of my compositions. So then the next step, I never really know what my composition is going to look like. I usually start off with an idea of like, okay, I want a lot of black in this one. I want it to be like a little bit more bold or more dynamic, or I want something really soft and calm and quieting. So I start by just putting shapes down on the panel. I don't glue anything until I really have kind of organized the composition the way that I want to. So it's kind of like putting a puzzle together, but yet you don't really know what the picture is going to look like. So it's just a lot of intuitive work. And here's a little video in high speed of me just kind of playing around with shapes, cutting things to fit the spaces. Yeah, just kind of process of trial and error until something sort of clicks and intuitively just feels right. And then, so once I've organized the piece the way that I want it, like Leah was talking about, I like to just use my phone and take a snapshot so I can live with it for a little bit and be sure before I glue it down that this is the composition that I like, that I feel strong about. I can also play around with a bunch of different versions of the composition, and I don't have to commit to anything right then and there. I can wait, I can take it home and show my husband and be like, hey, just what's your gut reaction? How do you feel about this? I can get other people's opinions. And I can just look back on it, another day with fresh eyes. It also helps me to kind of understand what's working and what's not working. And sometimes it just comes down to, what mood I'm trying to convey. So the image on the left is the collage that I started off with. And on the right is what I ended up gluing down. The one on the left felt a little bit too heavy for me. I wanted to incorporate some black shapes, but I wanted it to feel kind of delicate. And so on the right, this sort of little like bridge shape kind of ended up being the focal point. And I liked the line of the triangular piece underneath it. It felt like very dynamic, like there was some movement there. There's also some movement between the little orange dot over here. It's like, is it jumping up to be into that little bridge area, or is it falling down? And there's a little bit of tension there. And then I'm also thinking about, okay, well, I don't want the viewer's eye to just be stagnant in that one area of interest. So I added these tiny little black shapes around the corners. So, because they're very, it's bold next to these soft muted colors. So it kind of, after you spend some time, you know, in the center area here, your eye then starts to circle around to these other bold shapes. But yet it just felt a little bit quieter though than the piece on the right. And then the same here, the left is the collage that I did initially, and the right is what it turned out to be. I just wanted something softer and more subtle. And I thought it was a little more fun to have just that one accent red dot versus all of these contrasting dots. But yeah, really it's just kind of what you're going for, what mood you're trying to create. The next thing I do after I've figured out my composition, if it'll play, is I just glue things down. And it's a pretty simple process. I just apply it right to my paper. I use a brush to apply it smoothly, and the palette knife to scrape it down, get all the bubbles out, and make sure all of my edges are sealed down really well, because I don't want them to pop up when I apply the wax. And then I just repeat until the whole piece is done. And that's what it looks like afterwards. Although this one I actually changed, and I think I added a little orange triangle instead of the black one, because you're never done. So here's just a couple of comparison pieces. So the collages on the left, and then once I actually glued them down, inevitably, even if I think I have the composition the way that I want it, sometimes I'll make last minute changes when I'm gluing things, because the piece will kind of just start to speak to you and tell you what it wants. Make it more dynamic. And then here is a finished piece that I glued, but I wasn't totally sure of the orientation. And so I used our little camera phone trick to take 3 versions of it in different orientations so I could kind of live with them. And then again, going back to the photo editor in me, trying to decide, okay, which one felt stronger to me, which one felt a little bit more dynamic. And then after I made my mind up about the orientation, I could move forward with waxing and make sure everything was how I wanted it to be. So that's my collage process. Let me come back here and make Leah the host again.
Hold on one second.
I have a question.
Oh yeah.
What is the purpose of the wax for you? Because it seems like you put an awful lot of time into the collaging.
Yeah, I do. And it's terrifying when I cover it up with messy wax, but ultimately, I really like how the wax kind of serves as a protective surface. I think I referenced it sort of like a skin. I think kind of like our bodies, you know, it's there to protect us, but it's also really vulnerable and it's malleable. So I like it for like the patina that it creates. There's also a practical side to it. I don't have to frame it under glass because the papers are very vulnerable to the elements. And when I put wax on, it really just, you know, it repels moisture. It's very practical. I'm always, you know, trying to find, I try at least to be a very balanced person and work with, okay, I like things, you know, for their aesthetic purposes, but I'm also kind of thinking about the practicality of them and what the finished product is going to be like. So yeah, the wax ends up just being sort of another layer of distress. It allows me to make marks in the wax.
I was going to ask you, do you make marks into the wax?
Yeah, so I get pretty detailed with a lot of the mark making that I do. I'll spend hours, you know, poking little polka dots into the surface of the wax, which then will sort of magically reveal themselves when I apply paints to them and wipe it away. So it's super tedious, but it's just part of the process that I really love. And even just sort of psychologically, it's really therapeutic because you build up this collage, you spend so much time on it, and then you cover it all up with, yeah, what was that?
No, I wanted to interject right here because I think that the wax acts as multi-purposes. It has a lot of really, really important characteristics and abilities. One is texture, definitely texture. One is clarity. So the ability to sort of push and pull the viewer's eye towards something or away from something based on the thickness of the wax. Okay, So it goes back to and speaks directly to our camera functions of f-stops, right? And blur, right? Motion, blur, sharpness, okay? So for both Athena and I who come from photography, wax is like the perfect, it's literally like having another opportunity to put a lens on the surface of the work that's going to be speaking directly to the viewer. So focus, right? Clarity. For me, it's all about texture, 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 texture. And for Athena, it's about making those marks, right?
Yeah.
So like a
Well,
mark.
it also makes me think, Leah, how you were talking about your contact sheets and seeing like the little artifacts of, you know, dirt on the glass or water droplets on the glass. And so for me too, the wax sort of is like this vessel or this like carrier for all of these little artifacts, all of these little mark making artifacts that are subtle, but I think are really important to what I'm trying to do as well too. And
Right. And Athena and I are both working in what I would call a marriage, right? And the marriage concept is really that idea of meeting somebody 50-50. So the photo and the collage for me are kind of like that 50, and then I'm meeting the wax, you know, so it's like this marriage of these two worlds coming together, right? I mean, very rarely would I at this stage in my life like want to show a straight photograph, and that photograph would have to have some like really, 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 really strong presence for me to be able to not like want to wax it, right? So it's kind of like, all right, you're my photograph, I'm going to wax you. But I do think that the collages need the blending, right? So hopefully, and for those of you who have taken my workshops before, one of the things I love about wax is it gives you the ability to blend these layers, right? So if I cut out a piece of paper and lay it on another piece of paper, you're going to see a damn hard line of the one object on the other line. I don't want a hard line. I want those two pieces to look like they're in the same realm, right? That they're working together and that they're soft, that they're existing and really create this fantasy, right? So I don't know if you guys remember like early CGI movies when you were just like, oh my, like think way back to science fiction when you literally were like looking at a building and you saw like a claymation, you know, King Kong or like a little character. We don't, right? Now we're so sophisticated with CGI, it's you can't tell. You're like, yeah, wow, you know, that gorilla is like 150. Yeah, I believe it. It looks real, right? You're like, so there's this sort of, I think because we're creating this other unique environment, the wax is the glue, like the one is the activator that makes this happen. It makes these worlds, you know, whether it's a background, foreground, subject matter thing with a figure and like a receding background, or it's flowers popping forward, or floating heads, or geometric. The wax gives us that ability to create these altered surfaces and blend. It's the blending medium.
Yeah, it's like the missing ingredient that you need for this like magical alchemy to happen, you know, and it stops being just a collage with wax and it starts to be this magical sort of incorporated thing. So yeah, for me, it's, you know, it's almost like adding salt to your food where it's like, it's just that extra thing to give it, you know, that little bit of a boost. And then it allows me to work on that surface. And it is like Leah talked about the peanut butter and jelly sandwich, you know, you keep layering and layering, and what's underneath it is really important because you wouldn't, it's like your foundation. So the collage is my foundation, but it still needs these other layers to kind of evolve beyond it. But it's hard and it's scary, but I love the challenge of like, okay, I like this collage, but now I'm going to make it messy and then I'm going to work through the mess and clean it back up again. And so psychologically, I think it's that kind of letting go, like letting go of your ego and just trusting the process, trusting your materials, listening to your materials, and just keep working through it. So it can be very frustrating and scary, but it's super rewarding if you just keep going through it. Yeah.
All right, so I'm going to show the couple collage pieces that I have and how I make those collages, and then we're going to start doing some demonstrations. So I'm going to make probably 2 or 3 types of collage. I'm going to make 3 probably types of patchwork, collage work. And Athena, you're going to make something too, right?
Sure. I'll get my materials out and I'll just start to play around. Yeah.
So I'm going to show you guys these pictures that I wanted to show you. One is this. Oh, you have to make Athena. You have to make me the host again. it's like holding the magic baton. You have to give me the magic back. Give me the magic back. All right. So I'm gonna go. Hold on one second. I don't know why. You guys are blocking my screen here. Hold on. Oh, I just shrunk you guys. Now I don't know where you went. Wait, what? Oh. I don't know why my bridge disappeared. Oh, I'm gonna make you guys bigger. Oh, there you are. Woo, that was scary. You guys really disappeared. Like really. I made you so small. I didn't know where you went. Why is it doing this? I need my bridge program. I don't know why. Sometimes my Adobe gets like, there we go. Please open. All right, any day, leave it. It's coming. That's what we love about computers, right?
What is Adobe Bridge? What is that?
So I use Photoshop and Bridge. Bridge is like an editing program. Who asked me that?
I did. And
so Bridge is, you can sign on to Adobe. What do you use to edit your photos?
Elements.
Okay, you're fine. I mean, it's fine. Bridge is part of Photoshop, and it gives me like what I'm used to, which is like the contact sheet, right? So then I can view my images, right, in rectangles like this.
Okay.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't even know what folder this is, but this is a good folder right here. I mean, this is a good example of one of my collages.
Right.
Sorry, I don't know. So, and then I made it into black and white just to look at it, and I would most likely, like I made this collage in color, but then if I was going to paint it with wax, I would take it back to the black and white.
Mm-hmm.
I would never try to paint anything with color in it because I just find it too bossy. This is a good example of, hold on, I'm just gonna make this bigger. This is a good example of, I used a photo and a bunch of old letters. So, right, so this is old letters here, there's old letters under here, right? And then I just basically cut out this section of this portrait and glued it over. And then I painted over her eyes and her nose, right? Mm-hmm. And then I added flowers both in the background collage as well as in the foreground with wax. But like here, especially in this bottom corner, you can see the letters, right? So that's like the base. And then you can kind of like, that becomes a background, and then this becomes like a foreground, right?
Now, for instance, the flowers that are on the left there, are they all your photographs, or do you get things from magazines too sometimes?
No, I definitely, okay, so my personal collection, and I think every artist should definitely have an attachment of where they get stuff and what they like to source. I think that's sort of part of who you are. Mm-hmm. So the majority of my collage material comes from my grandmother, Eleanor. She and her sister, Peg, my Aunt Peg really was a hoarder. And so everyone wrote letters back then, and they had boxes. I mean, my Aunt Peg had 3 apartments filled with old letters, and my Aunt Bonnie was going to throw it all in the trash. So luckily I got a hold of at least 6 boxes or something, maybe 8. And that's what I use. So these are my personal family letters. There are, and actually you guys should know about this woman if you really like collage work. Her name is Crystal Neubauer. And she and I met at the Encaustic Castle. And she sells, and you know, once you start like, oh, I like this, it's so awesome in life. And I don't know if you guys, but like other doors start to open up and you get more of what you like, right? When you're like that's how I felt about the Starn twins. Like once I fell in love with their work and I knew they were successful, it just like opened up doors for me to like do what I knew was right for me. That I liked that. I liked that, taking the photo apart, and I liked putting it back together. You know, it's like a very puzzles. I mean, some people might really. I mean, I never really knew that I loved puzzles, but now I'm like, oh my god, all my work is sort of like connected to this like puzzle net, like putting things. And I feel like that's what we do when we're living, is we're like putting things together so they work well together, right? It's like putting the pieces of your life or your day together that work well for you. So that whole analogy of puzzling, I think, is really beautiful, of putting pieces together of things that you like, right? And another way to think about that too is like, I know I love the way the old letters look. I know I love pictures of women, and I know I love flowers. So that I puzzled those three things together into my art, right? So your things could, like Athena's things are like architecture, marks, you know, she showed you the things that inspire her, right? And then she also collects ephemera, found objects, and she can tell you where she gets her stuff. But most of my stuff comes from personal family stuff. And then the flowers come from books. I source the material out. I like vintage flowers, especially like the early floral, like historical botanicals. Those are my favorite. And then I might even hand
The
color them.
florals from books then. So
Yeah, from
vintage
books. And then I scan the books and reprint them, or Xerox the books and reprint them.
Okay.
So it is very important that the elements that you pick in your work definitely speak to you and have a powerful significance or connection to you. And then the more you do it, you kind of edit out what you don't want to use in the collage and what you do want to use and how it looks. So like Crystal Neubauer, she sells collage baggies, and I think other people on Etsy sell ephemera bags, and you could easily buy, you know, they're like $8 to $10 or 20. You know, if you're not able to go to flea markets now or a thrift shop, you can definitely get some of this stuff online. And Crystal is, I can show you her work clearly, but I met her in Lexington, Kentucky at the Encaustic Castle, and she is by far my favorite, like out of this world ephemera collage artist. Like I just love, and I love her stuff. So this is an interesting piece for me. This piece was actually called, oh, sorry, not this one. I mean, this one is too, but this one's called Awakening. And the entire background, these two black panels, are all made of old letters. So if I get bigger, if you look closely, you can see like all the whole background of this painting is old letters, and then I put the figure in the middle on top of the old letters, right? So you can see the old letters coming through here and here. Okay. So, and I'm going to show you guys how I do that, but I wanted to show you something else. I wanted to show you the puzzle piece. Let me show you the puzzle piece. And I'll put Crystal's name up there. Okay, so this is the horse piece. And I made, so do you see, you guys see, so I took the big photo and then I put it on this wood. And I'm going to demonstrate this. So I put it on this wood. It's like chipboard, right? And I just put these down on the photo, tore around, cut it out, and then I glued these back together onto a larger panel with wood glue. And I'll make one this weekend. But I just thought it was beautiful. I mean, for a nice, simple, you know, image like this, I just thought it gave it like this really neat dimension. And of course, ode to Starn twins. I mean, literally, this is my, you know, Starn. And I don't have any shame in that. Like, I love them. I love this piece. This is successful for me. I really enjoyed making it. I loved working sort of like on each small panel, you know, and then putting it back together. It was just very joyful for me. I really had a good time. All right, so wait, let me see if I don't know why. I wanted to show you guys a couple of my collages before I wax them. So like, this is an example of something that I might do just to get started. So this was the photo that I was using. The piece on the left, with the flowers, that's actually a stencil. So I just set this up and took a picture of it to kind of give me a little forward thinking insight to like, oh, if I glue this down, then I could add this stencil here, right? So it's like, this is just an example. And then that little piece of lace, like I probably wouldn't glue this little piece of lace there, but I put it in a picture, and I took a picture so I could sort of start to like imagine, you know, colors and shape and composition and where something might be placed. So that's kind of just an example. This is actually an example of a finished piece. So you can kind of see how I collage, right? Here's my black and white photo. And this goes right back to what you were saying. These flowers here are in color and are actually from another color photograph that I took. Okay. This picture is also a cutout flower from a photograph that I took. So lately I've been really interested in photographing flowers, which is new for me. I actually did not photograph flowers unless someone was like paying me to do it until 2 years ago. Okay. So I'm very actually excited and happy to be in this sort of botanical floral part of my photography career, and I'm very new at it. So I'm trying all sorts of crazy things, which if you tune into my abstract floral workshop, you can get a gist. And I'm definitely not an expert, so I'm really trying hard. Okay. But I did have a little foresight, like with this piece, that I wanted to split the canvas. And somebody, I don't know if it was Anne or somebody today, already asked me, like, yeah, I cut her in half and I used another photo entirely for the bottom. But I found that the shape of this photo at the bottom mirrored the shape of her body. Mm-hmm. So that's why I chose it, right? And then I added these additional pieces to kind of like make her dress, which seems like a little bit cliche, but like what actually happened with this piece when it was finished is that the second half became like this almost mirror reflection of the top half, but it was like dark. So I called her Persephone because that meant like half of her was in the light and half was in the dark. So this is another example of one of my collage pieces. This is like kind of how I start. So you can see a little bit of this, like I put this big rectangle here. I put this rectangle of a photo here. I put this, you know, this was a rectangle, this was a square. And then I sort of like to get this effect of like weaving, right? Where things go over and under each other, right? So you can see how her figure goes under this panel. And then this corner floral piece is also a photo that I took. Now you guys are really getting the inside view because I don't show these collages very often. And I never know where the paintings are going to go, right? So again, this is another example of a collage. And like I took this photo, I took this photo. These are some like store-bought papers, which I often, and this is one of my family letters. So I do love any of those, you know, art supply stores that have handmade papers. This is actually a vintage doily, this thing right here. This is some old letters. This is a handmade paper. And notice how I intentionally like cut off her skirt and I sort of start to reconstruct the skirt with paper, right? So that's just sort of like my like narrative. Like I could have, you know, constructed more stuff around her head, or I could have constructed more stuff. I could have put her in an urban environment. Like if Athena and I did a collaborative piece, we could put a woman in an urban environment. You want to do that, Athena? Right? Like you could make the background and I could just put one of my people in there with flat. We could have like a floral girl in an urban environment. That would be our baby. If we have
this one here has that. Wait, go back to that one that you're there. The bottom left-hand corner has a man there, right?
No, there's no man there.
No?
No, it's just, it's actually, you know what? I see a bird actually. And this one, I see a bird. Do you see the beak? I see like a bird sitting.
Oh, that's a bird. I thought it was a man. That's gone.
I don't actually think it's a bird. I think it's just a thing.
That's weird.
I saw the man too. It's almost like he's in a black vest with
he's in a vest.
Yeah.
You guys are like without a face, like without a
Yeah.
Okay, okay, I touched you.
It tells you about like what's going on subconsciously.
That's so funny. So this is actually goes back to what Athena and I were talking about photography as a tool in your studio. So these were live flowers that I'd been photographing. So I just wanted to play around with using my collage and putting a bunch of live object, like things on it. So that's one of the ways too, like when I'm feeling a little bit burned out or I don't know what to do next, I'll take the collage and I'll start putting lace on it, take pictures, or I'll put flowers on it, take pictures, does that make sense? So here it was like this, right? And I was like just playing around. I wanted to see what happened. Yes. Do you have a question?
Yeah. When you print your photographs, what kind of paper do you print them on?
Well, that's a really good question. I print them on, I think that's all the photos I wanted to show you. Let me switch back from screen share. So I have been sponsored by Hanemule Paper Company since probably 2009. And so I exclusively use their papers. And they are incredible. Have you heard of them?
No. How do you spell that?
I'm going to spell it. I'm going to put it in the chat. Yep. Hanemule paper. And actually, if you guys make any work or use any of their papers, definitely use their hashtag because Carol, and if you want to try, I'm happy to print one for you, for like 10 or 15 bucks and mail it to you. So a lot of my students ask me to print on paper so they can try them, because getting the printer, buying the paper is a big financial commitment. But if you really love it, I love printing myself. I love being able to sort of produce all my own work. Hence, what I was talking about, the patchwork, is that if I want to work bigger, I have to put the pieces back together, right? And Athena is the one that helps me in Photoshop sort of dissect the photos, like with the crop tool. It's sort of tricky. And then you basically print out, a series of 8x10s or 11x14s. And then you could play around with different tonal values of each of those prints, like the Star and Twins, and then put the puzzle back together, right? And it's really fun. You guys, I mean, I don't do anything in my studio unless I like it. Okay, so this is something that I'm doing because I enjoy it, right? It also solved a lot of problems for me, like outsourcing such a big photo, gluing such a big photo, right? So there are also, not only is it fun, but it solves a lot of technical issues for me and gives me enjoyment, right? So it's two-part.
Which Hanemule papers do you prefer?
I use 3 exclusively. So I use Photo Rag, 188, William Turner, 188.
I just ordered that too.
Rice paper. Yeah. Okay. William Turner paper is like, I wrap it. I love it. I love it. It's just, I mean, look, I just made this bifold last weekend. And this is beautiful, but it's because of the paper. No, it's because, I do an okay job, but the wax and the paper are so beautiful. Right? So I took 2 pieces of wood, right? 2 rectangles. I taped them together on the back. And then I just put the picture on, and it's like a stand. Look at it. It's like so cute. It's like a stand up.
What kind of printer do you have, Vi?
I have the cheapest printer I could possibly buy. And it's like, if anything happens to my printer, I'm going to have a funeral for it. And you all have to come and bring flowers because it's been such a good printer. Oh my God. It's like when you have a really good dog, you're like, you just can't go away. Right? Do not go. So I have the Epson 3880, which they no longer make, but it's the cheapest. It's like the baby one. It's the baby of all the Epsons. And it's not, I would never, ever, ever buy a roll printer. Ever. Never.
You would never buy a what?
A roll printer, a bigger printer. I would never buy a bigger printer.
Why not?
Because I want to just do it I want to do it in pieces. I love my style and I'm committed to my work. It's part of my process now. And it's so much easier just to deal with one sheet. When you deal with the roll,
wow,
you have to deal with a lot of complications of getting the roll to work.
Nice printer.
Nice printer.
Oh, you got the roll printer, Sarah. Oh wait, let's pin Sarah. She's showing off. Hold on. Go ahead, Sarah. You do. Oh yeah, look at you. I could see that's too much technology for me. Like, oh my, it's like a spaceship. And even that door flap that you see there, it like locks like it's like like it's astronaut thing. And it doesn't open.
I have a smaller one.
Wait here, we got Anne's got one too. Let's see Anne. All right, everybody show us the printers. And thanks, Sarah. Brett.
Mine's an Epson P800, Sure Color P800.
Yeah. I mean, and even if you're using like a home, like HP, Canon, or whatever, you can buy 8x10 sheets of, matte photo paper and just use that, right? I say be creative.
Yeah. Can I interject for a second too? Especially if you don't have a photo background, it can be kind of intimidating to think about, buying these fancy printers or even just, a box of paper that's like $70. It's kind of a commitment to make when you're like, I don't even know for sure if I'm going to like this. So I've used Xeroxes in the past. I've just taken a bunch of like reference materials to Staples and just Xeroxed things like crazy, and glued them to my panels. I think do some experiments first, and then if you like it, maybe then go ahead and invest in some nicer papers or some nicer printers, or maybe you like that kind of raw look of the Xeroxes. Sometimes I'll make a Xerox and then Xerox it again and again and again until you have all those like lovely little artifacts. But I always just want to tell people to never be like super intimidated by the materials or the supplies. Like Leah said, that big roll printer was too much for her, and I think it's totally fine. Like some people are more techie and gear oriented, and if that's who you are, totally go for that. But if it isn't, find an alternative that you feel comfortable with, because it's all about feeling comfortable, so you'll go ahead and explore creatively. Yeah.
Leah, you mentioned something about hashtagging Hanemule.
Yeah.
Was there a reason to hashtag them, or just?
Well, because they sponsor me, and so typically, like, whenever I do a workshop, like when I do in-person workshops, I usually include the print. So when I was traveling, I mean, it's only because of COVID that I'm on Zoom. I mean, if it was up to me, we would all be together somewhere.
Yeah.
So part of my workshops have been for the last like 10 years is that people send me photographs, and I get paper from Hanemule. I print for people. I come to the workshop with 4 or 5 prints for you. And that's been, they've been generously supporting me in that way. So if you decide to use it, and you do use it, and you make something and you share it and you use their paper, they're super good people and they support artists. Like their corporate director met me in California and came to one of my workshops.
Nice.
They really do support artists. So that's why I say, if you like their products, support them back.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I like some of their paper for like the platinum palladium printing too. It works really well.
Yeah, I think all of their goods are very high quality, and it's nice to, like, again, like Athena and I were talking about, I think as an artist you could be easily overwhelmed by all these options, right, and choices. So for me, like, knowing that I use that printer, knowing which Photoshop program I use, knowing which paper I use, just kind of like hones me in a little bit, so that I can be like more experimental, maybe with just like wax or color or texture, right? Because you want to sort of have some things that are consistently accessible for you, that you can depend on as being high quality and familiar, right? And that also helps to sort of create a style or look to your work, right? So that you're consistently delivering a product that's recognizably yours. And one of the ways that I've been able to do that is by using some of these source materials consistently and really getting to know them well, such as the Hanemule paper, such as the Epson printer. I also use image print to actually print at home, and I use alien skin for my software. I usually use wood, and I always use encaustics, right? So it's and so those are some things that are consistently threaded in my work.
I have a question. You were saying, and I see you now putting down pieces of wood.
Yes.
You call them chipboard?
This is actually, so it was funny that Athena mentioned, so both of our husbands, yes, and I can make this picture bigger. Both of our husbands work with their hands. So my husband works on movie sets. So I get the benefit of the set construction, because basically everything that you see on TV is created in a room.
Right.
Even if it's like outside, even if it's a street, it's often created in a room, like a warehouse. So the entire street. So I get some wood, and this has been awesome. This is like fairly thin wood, and then Duncan will just cut it up into pieces, and then I can figure out how I want to put it together. And then technically I could put it on, I mean, I could put it even on fabric. I could glue these onto canvas. I could glue these onto paper. I mean, they're fairly lightweight, or I could glue them onto another panel, right? And also, look at
Do
this.
you think it's necessary though to have wood as the base, or could it be a heavier paper?
No, it could absolutely be a heavier paper. Look, I made this like I made this like landscape piece. This is like a photo, and then I extended, this is paper on paper, right? So I just glued two papers together, and then I could glue this to, when it's dry, it's oily right now, but I could glue it to, this, right? Or I could glue it, and this is something, I can glue it to a larger canvas too, and then figure out how to use this, or I could collage it, right? I mean, I could glue, and this is sort of like, Athena is going to talk to you more specifically about how she builds up, but technically, like if I took a board, oh, I'm just getting a phone call. Oh, no, I'm not getting a phone call. I'm gonna run out of, okay. Am I back? Okay. So technically, like I could glue this board to this board and then start waxing. I could even do, right? Like, and then I can wax over this. So wait, I need to give you guys two names. So before I forget, Crystal Neubauer. She's the collage artist, right? And you guys should all know too about Patricia Sedgebrook. She also she uses a lot of cardboard, right? So Athena, do you use cardboard to build up your wax?
I mostly just work with wood, but you could definitely use cardboard. In the past, I've used it as a substrate before. I think just the only thing to keep in mind is just whatever your substrate is, it should be somewhat porous or absorbent, because you want the wax to be able to sort of soak into it, to make it, give yourself a very sturdy foundation. If you're using something like really shiny, like metal, or like a plastic surface, with temperature changes in particular, your wax can sort of just peel off of your substrate, and that would be bad. So that's why I like just using like the unprimed wood panels. I like to use, let me show you. I get most of mine from Blick. And I like to use a cradled panel, just because it makes it a little bit more of an object when it hangs on the wall. And sometimes I'll use like a thicker 2-inch panel. I think the cradled panel helps sometimes for really large pieces. It helps avoid some of the warping that can happen when you're applying the hot wax into the wood. Sometimes it can get a little funky. But yeah, basically I like wood. That's what I use. Yeah, wood or paper, some like heavy duty like watercolor paper I'll use sometimes too. Something that's going to be sturdy enough. When I work on paper though, I always usually mount it and frame it, so you reduce the chance of it sort of bending, which can eventually cause cracking. So
I added Neubauer is spelled differently than you had it.
No, wait, I'm sorry. I was gonna say it's
Neubauer.
Wait, hold on. I know. I'm sorry. Spell it for me again.
Neu. I put it in the chat. Neu.
Oh yeah, you spelled it right. What did I say? Oh, I added an A.
Yeah.
Okay. I'm sorry. I apologize. Tell Crystal if you buy anything from her, tell her I'm sorry. No. And also, so what I was gonna show you guys. Hold on. I just had to charge my phone. Hold on 1 second. That's why that's why we went out, because I was getting a notification that my phone was gonna die. All right, now we're not gonna die. All right, so I wanted to show you guys too. Corrugated cardboard is incredible. So cardboard, right? So you could just imagine all this waffle stuff, right, with wax on it. Okay, so really beautiful. And if you wanted to create like sort of, you know, a textured, you could glue it to the board. Then you could put a photo here. You could put a photo over here. And especially if you're using those lighter weight papers like a Xerox paper or, you know, a rice paper, once you put the glue on that paper, you're going to be able to go over here, like into this, you know, space on this side, over here and around the space. Like the paper will mold to the shape, right? Those lighter weight papers. That's why I only, at this point in my career, only use those lightweight papers, is because I want them to be crunch. I want to be able to wrinkle them, fold them, crease them, move them when I glue them, right? So I want a lot of flexibility in my paper. So I like the lighter weight papers. Okay. Athena, I'm gonna start to make, any questions? We just did like a lot of like intro work. I can show you guys too my studio setup, what I have right here, and my gluing process. I mean, it's pretty much the same as what Athena showed you, right? She showed you like a foam brush. I use PVA glue, but I also use this, and I kind of got a really aggressive with gluing in the last 2 years, especially during COVID.
Your tabletop.
I'm
just
sorry,
seeing
am I
you.
not pinned? Is this not pinned?
I'm just seeing your face.
Hold on. Oh, you don't want to see that. Sorry. No, wait, I thought this was pinned. Thank you, Sarah. Sorry, sometimes I can't. Wait, sorry. I thought I did that. Okay.
There we go.
Could we have just a 3-minute bathroom break?
Yes.
Being
Yes.
an older woman, I need to.
Yes, we can totally
do
take
that.
it. Yes, actually, I would be great for me too, because I can kind of like prep my table for the next. Yeah, we're officially taking a 3-minute bathroom break.
Great.
Okay.
I got a snack.
Really, that's so funny.
I recognize that photo.
This one? I know I wasn't
Yeah.
talking about this, except that remember when I split the panel, and I still think it could be cool if I put something, like something
In between.
like something in the middle, like something, like something.
Mm-hmm.
I haven't figured out what yet. I haven't waxed it yet either, but I do actually really kind of. It was funny. I actually love this flat. This came from like I forget the designer's name, but like one of those famous vintage wallpaper designers.
I think you used it in the piece that I bought.
Split.
I think you used those flowers in the piece that I bought.
Oh yeah, the one that I did in the demo, the one of Rachel. Yeah. Oh, the red and blue one. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I think I used a piece of this, but I should really scan it because I don't know if I have that much more of it. But I love. I just love the shape of it and the way. I don't know. I just love it. So like when you
That
find
reminds
like, doesn't that look cool? Like this, where she's just like, there's something, and then this could be like something really simple.
That reminds me of a kid's book that I used to have that was in 3 different play pieces, and you could put different middles and tops and bottoms to all of them.
That book, yes, I know. That's what this reminds me of too. But like, look
Yeah.
how beautiful, right? And then I could,
Yeah.
it's like so cool, and I like even like the distance, like right, and then I could. I mean, you could figure out how the lines line up, like
That's
I like,
cool.
wait, maybe, oh, I know, here. And this is true, like you have to kind of move. So here's our arm, right? And then this could be like, I always like to connect the lines, right?
Right.
This thing's like coming out of her arm here. And then it would be like coming down. I mean, you gotta, and then that could be nice,
Uh-huh.
right? Something like that. And then this could be white. And then be on top of it, and then I could wax the whole thing. All right.
Mm-hmm.
All right, so that's a possibility. And again, it's like really just having fun and playing around with these different. But I definitely think I have to scan that. But I wanted to show everybody this piece too because I basically took one photo, and I just so I could just put her back together like that, which is fairly simple, or I could just hang it. I mean, that could be subtle enough, right? It's just like how far do you want to go with it? So I could just you know, or I can, you know, or like put it on something else. Okay. I got a bunch of stuff that I was gonna. Athena, you want to go first? You want to make something? I think we're both just gonna make something, and then we'll do like a Q&A, and that might be it for today. I'm gonna make 3 pieces actually. I got my pieces picked out.
You guys sort of see this okay? I just kind of tilted.
Yeah, wait, let me pin you.
Okay.
Oh, that looks nice. Well, now wait, are those little wood cubes?
Yeah, so I always just start with like a random shape. So from my, hang on, let me see if I can show it to you guys. I've got like this bin that I collect a bunch of random scraps and shapes and stuff. So usually when I'm looking for inspiration, I'll start by just rummaging around through it and see if I can find a weird shape or pattern that I like. So I started with this like L shape. I thought it was kind of fun and it was like a good prompt to kind of build from.
Yeah, like it's like your necklace. Look at your necklace.
I know, right?
What's your necklace? Did you make that?
No, it's an artist in the DC area. I think her name is like Hadja Williams or something. Yeah, she does a lot of these really cool geometric shapes. And when I found her, I'm like, oh my gosh, it's like my collage work. So
I know that girl. I know that person.
So anyway, so I started with that and it's been a little while. I've been working flat for some time and I've been kind of missing using these little chunky cubes. So I thought, well, today would be a really great day to get back into it. So they're just little like 1-inch cubes of wood, nothing special about them. I think it might just be pine or something. Now I could just place it sort of randomly and let it just be one square. I kind of like building them up to kind of create different shapes. So it's a little bit more interesting and complex. So I was like, okay, well, I have this nice L shape here. Let me try putting a little cluster of wood pieces here. I don't like to arrange it too close to my paper because inevitably when the wax gets on them, it's gonna get a little bit built up around these corners. So I'm gonna have to do a lot of like scraping and cleaning up. So I'm gonna leave a little bit of space between the paper and the wood. And then from there, I'm just basically building, trying to put puzzle pieces together. I feel like using a lot of off-whites today, which is a big surprise. I found this other kind of fun shape. I think I'm gonna try that in the corner up here. Now, I like to add little dashes of color so things don't get too monotonous. I like this sort of off white or off turquoise kind of color. It's actually the reverse side of just some graph paper that I painted. So I think I want to try to put it in this area here because I've got a lot of sort of horizontal lines going now. So I kind of want to create some movement vertically. So I'm never super precise when I cut things. I don't really like measure it. I just kind of hold it up and eyeball it. I'll sort of fold it to see if I'm close with size, and then I just cut it. And really, I'm just working with bits of scrap paper. So if I'm not perfect, it's fine. If it doesn't fit, I put it in my little bin and it'll work in another piece sometime. So I could also tear it if I wanted to, if I wanted to have more of like a deckled edge. So let's see how that fits. I think that'll be kind of a fun little pop of color there. Now I'm just gonna kind of play and see what else fits. I could hold up some darker colors, see if that works with what I'm doing, or maybe just keep going using more neutrals. Sometimes I will cut like random little strips. I don't know if you guys can see that very well. From book pages, if there's like a fun texture or pattern, I might not like the whole page, but there was like something really fun about these diagonal lines. So I just cut this little section out.
Have you ever used the inside of envelopes that you get that are?
Oh my gosh, I love the patterns inside envelopes. They're so beautiful. Yeah, I think I've even taken them and I've scanned them so then I can sort of like size them up and you know, distort them a little bit. But oh, they're so beautiful. I'm all about, you know, if you can't tell, finding those patterns in nature and in the real world and just finding the beauty in them, you know. There's so much that we overlook, but if we actually decide to look at it, it's beautiful. So so here I'm gonna just kind of keep playing. And this is the part that it's always so hard to kind of give guidance on because it really just feels like play. It feels like being a little kid and just trying new things, seeing what works, what feels good. I'm pretty much just being very intuitive. Although I don't like to get too carried away using a ton of colors. I usually stick to like a very monochrome color palette and then I'll pick maybe like 2 or 3 accent colors. I feel like if I get too carried away with just a bunch of colors, the composition can kind of lose its focus a little bit. When I'm working, you know, just purely abstractly, I don't have like a grounding point like the photograph. So it really has a lot to do with color and shape as being kind of like my main characters. So I feel like if there's too many main characters, it just gets a little bit overwhelming for me. And I think it can be like a little bit too messy visually, at least for what I'm trying to accomplish. So I really like this turquoise color. I'm gonna try to figure out what other color I wanna use with it. Have these bins that I kind of sort of sort my colors, my neutral colors, and then my brighter colors. Like this pink color, so I might cut some shapes out of this and see if I can make them work. So I kind of have a little bit of this warm pinkish brown color going on over here. So I kind of like the idea of balancing it out by maybe putting another warm pink color up here in the corner. So I'm gonna just kind of do a little bit of a fold so I know where roughly I want to cut. And I don't like things being super perfect and precise. This kind of goes back to that wabi-sabi design philosophy where I like showing the imperfections, the handwork. You know, I'm not super technical. I'm pretty calculated with what I'm doing, but yet I like it to feel human and a little bit imperfect to kind of balance that out. So I think I like that. Now I start to see like the puzzle. So I realize I've got some interesting shapes here I can start to plan for. To mix it up a little bit, I think I might try doing some repetitive shapes. Hang on 1 second. I'm gonna cut a piece of paper that'll sort of roughly fit here, but instead of just putting a square down, I'm gonna try making some little rectangular strips. Let's see. So I have some little stripes here now. I think I kind of like that. And maybe I'll balance it out by doing some down here in the corner, because right now, this part of my piece is kind of more dynamic and this is kind of soft and quiet. So I don't want the focus to just stay up here and then have this part neglected. So I think what I'm going to do is maybe repeat some of these stripes down here in this corner. So I'm gonna probably have to cut a bigger piece to fill that space. I'm gonna make some creases so I know how big it needs to be. That'll fit pretty well. Maybe make it a little smaller. And the other stripes I did were horizontal, so I think I'm gonna go with vertical stripes. And then just piece them together. And if I decide I don't like it, I can just take them away and figure something else out. But I think I like that. I might live with it overnight and see how I feel. So yeah, I'll kind of just keep working from here, filling in the gaps. Now I could, with these little wood cubes, I could just keep them the color of the wood because it'll match the panel that's underneath. But I think I want them to stand out a little bit more. So I might decide to paint them a color, probably like an off-white color, maybe something similar to this color paper here. But I'm probably gonna wait until the very end to do that until I see what the rest of my composition looks like. And then, so Leah mentioned using like a really heavy duty glue. I use the PVA glue for all of my paper, but when it comes to gluing wood onto my panel, I use a regular, a carpenter's wood glue, because you need something a little bit sturdier, stronger, especially if you have some weight to it. I mean, I'll avoid using something really heavy. You might want to try like screwing it into your panel if you're using like a really big chunk of wood, but I usually just try to use very lightweight, tiny pieces. So anyway, do you guys have any questions or? I really like these lines. I want to find a way to use them. Maybe I'll use a little strip up here.
So when you work like this, do you miss a photo? Do you miss the photo or do you not miss the photo? Do you miss having the photo as a?
I don't really. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, there are some good things about having the photo, like I feel like I'm always going into the composition with a much clearer idea of what, of how I want my composition to be when I'm working with the photo, because it's like a very direct prompt. And that's why I will still go back and I'll work with photos sometimes, but I do love how like meditative this process is. And it's like a lot of like push and pull, adding things, then taking them away because I realize they don't work. And then sometimes I'll go ahead and I'll put them back. And I don't know, there's something like very soothing about that process, about just like the flow of it all. Yeah.
And are you thinking in lights and darks, or are you just thinking in terms of shape right now?
Both for sure. I think you can create visual interest with lights and darks, and sometimes you need like those dark shapes as like grounding points.
You don't tend to go too dark. I mean, you have black and white piece. You've done like white and gray.
Yeah, I will use black, but very, very sparingly.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So you're gonna go ahead and glue that down? Oh, you're gonna use, there's your black piece.
Yeah, I think not yet. This might take me a little while, just kind of figuring out the composition, but if you wanted to switch over and talk about your process,
You want to glue
and
that
then we can.
down and I'll start. Okay, so I'm a little messier.
Yeah. Okay.
All right. So also, so I'm a little messier, right? So here's my pile. And also, I think my phone is charging. Okay, is my tabletop the main view?
Yes.
Okay.
Mhm.
Okay. So I actually was just looking through some of the stuff that I have. Wait, did I just freeze? Did I froze? Yes. Is everything frozen? No. Hold on.
Just your tabletop.
Just my tabletop? All right, let's
Yeah.
try again. Better? Yeah. Oh, okay, movement. Okay, so
Yeah.
this is some of the stuff I picked out. Oh, I did want to show everybody, I just found this. So this is kind of cool. It definitely speaks to that idea of patchwork. So it looks like it's a photograph. It looks like there's like kind of a fuzzy one.
We're seeing you, not your, we're
I'm
seeing,
holding it.
yeah, we're seeing you though. We're not seeing that. Now we are.
Okay. So I just found this piece by I don't even know. This is from SF Camera Work. It's an old card, but you can obviously just see that I've been interested in this kind of grid and reconstruction of photographs for a long time, right? So it looks like this looks like a landscape, and then this looks like the same picture as this, but two different tonalities, right? So that's actually just often very beautiful. Again, another very simple technique. And then some type of image was kind of like put in here. And this also reminds me maybe of quilting, right? Where you would take like a large square and then quilt a small square on top of it, right? And especially because Athena lived in Pennsylvania, but I live in Pennsylvania. So I've grown up, with seeing Amish quilting and quilting being a part of our Pennsylvania heritage. And I learned how to sew at a very young age and made a lot of small squares. And I also did quite a bit of crazy quilting. So I often think about those references too when I'm making art. So I pulled out a bunch of different letters and noticed like my tonality is definitely all of these beautiful sort of coffee tones, off-white tones. I know that Candace has taken my watercolor classes in the past, and when I did photography, I often tea stained paper, right? So you could also be making your own collage papers, right? So if that's an extra step that anybody is interested in, I actually have a couple, definitely Instagram or IGTV videos about tea staining, but really just use a strong tea like a Lipton or a rose pea coat, and you can put like basically any paper. You could even do drawings and stain the paper and then incorporate them in your collage, or print things out on your copy machine or your Xerox and stain them to get this color, right? This is this color because it's 122 years old, right? But you can also get this color from brown watercolor, raw umber watercolor paper. I'm always fascinated that they had quite a bit of blue stationery, right? That was kind of this color blue, which I really like. And somebody mentioned the inside of a letter. The other thing I'm really interested in is people's handwriting, because I just don't think that handwriting is going to be something that we're going to see a lot of in the future.
Mhm.
So it very much saddens me that we're going to lose sort of penmanship. So I'm probably not as interested in the type, right, as I am in the handwriting, right? So I'm much more interested in especially the cursive, right? Because they're basically going to stop teaching kids cursive and it's going to sort of disappear, possibly in the future. So very interested in the handwriting. So like this is a whole stack from 1945 of handwritten letters, right? And they're pencil. So I'm also looking at sort of like the positive and negative space and sort of how illegible I think this writing really is. Like not everybody could even read this, right? So then it becomes much more of abstract sort of art form, and positive and negative space and shape than it does actual information. And when I use it in my art, I don't ever think of anybody like wanting to read it. So like that's not the important thing. The important thing is sort of just the tactileness of it. All right, so I'm not going to use any. Oh, but I did want to show you guys. Look, I have an original Sears and Roebuck letterhead letter from 1939. They don't even exist anymore, Sears and Roebuck. Isn't that crazy? So I'm definitely going to keep that. That might actually be worth a few bucks. Okay, so this is kind of interesting. Like, I like this whole letter. I like the penmanship. I also like the space, and I like that there's numbers on it. I think that's cool. I also really like this sort of found frame-y object, and it has like a green tone, right? So I might start to kind of put together some things that have like the same color palette, right? So these look good together. And this is one of those beautiful letter envelopes with a bunch of stripes on it. So like that might be nice. And I'm gonna make a couple pieces too. I'm gonna pass on the purple one. And I'm going to use this flower picture as my kind of like photo thread. Now this is something that I do a lot where I'll take a picture and I'll print it on different paper types and also different sizes so that I can play around with scale. Okay, so just to throw one more sort of element into the mix is I like to play around with scale so that I have repetition of form and shape and sort of composition, but then I can also have it bigger or smaller. So here I have a bunch of these photos, and I'm gonna get rid of some stuff. So I'm gonna do this something with this green and beigey one, and I'm gonna make a layer. So this will be like a background layer. I also want to use this piece of cardboard, and I'm gonna do like a brown one, right? So I instantly saw this where I kind of like the structure like of this side being on the wood, and then I like this side being unstructured and possibly, you know, connected, but like totally different, almost like a diptych. So I'm gonna do, and then I can just kind of arrange these. Now I like to layer them like a weave, right? So Athena likes to really keep the lines shape. I want the sharp lines to blend with the curved lines. So here I can't go as straight as she can, right? I'm just like not. Right? So also like back to back like that I think could be interesting. And then I want to put the blue in, so I might just tear it. I also do quite a bit of cutting and ripping, right? And I could go overlapping like that. And then I think I could like extend the canvas, like so that these two are connected, I could kind of, right? And so for me, a lot of what I'm looking for is sort of these irregular shapes that sort of start to happen. And I'm gonna move, hold on one second. It's asking me something on my side. Okay. So, and then I might just start to glue. So like, too, like if I was by myself in the studio, I might like take a picture of this and then maybe move them around, right? Right, what does it look like with take one out, right? So try a couple different compositions, right? I could also try just like layering it the other way, right? And I'm not worried, you know, I kind of like them to have like a little outside space, and I like these sort of like in between spaces. I think I like that. I definitely created like more of a checkerboard, right, by alternating the colors. And I know that this is really just a background for me too, so I'm gonna set that aside. I'll glue that. I also had the idea to do this one, and I thought this could be really fun, where I put something on here and then I sort of put something over. And again, like I'm really thinking about sort of weaving it, right? So I could put it over, so I could do like this, right? Which would be cool, or I kind of like this one vertical. I could do something like this. I could also spread them out. Oh, I think I like this, because I'm going to do something back here and then I'm going to do something on here. Okay. So I'm going to take these three away. I think I might do this on the background. And like, I don't really know how this is going to look. I'm just kind of like I do like these layers though, and I like to block out information, right? So I know that if I put this over, I'm going to get this going behind, right? And I try to talk about this a lot in encaustic, is that sort of like something going back and something coming forward, right? So something going under and behind and something going forward. And I think that that just makes it interesting composition. And two, for like these flowers, like I try to think, you know, like where they are going to make sense, and sort of I could expand on them. So like right on this dividing line, right? And I'm kind of connecting this line to this line. Like I like to make connections between the layers, so I could put that there. And then again, like I could use, you know, another piece to kind of like block out the text again and create these positive and negative shapes of what I can see and can't see, right? So it's sort of where I start that dance of what I can see and can't see. So I'm going to glue that. If I wanted to add, I could add something over here too. And again, so this is like already like, this would be like my third paper layer, right? So I'm doing paper on top of paper. And I'm going to tear, I'm not going to cut straight, so I could tear, I could put that piece there. All right. And then what I was thinking is that I would use these flowers and put them on these blocks over top of this, right? So that's what I'm thinking. So then these would go, oh, see, I really like maybe even just that one. You guys like just that one?
Yeah.
Yeah, I like just that one too.
Mhm.
I think that's going to look good. And maybe, oh, maybe another one.
Or maybe you could do a square one rather than rectangular.
Yeah, I don't know.
Same size, but square.
Yeah, I'd have to cut it. I'd have
Yeah,
to,
you'd have to cut it.
I'd have to
Mhm.
cut it. And maybe, and also like it could stick out, right? It doesn't have to,
Oh,
like, why does it have to,
that's true.
why does it have to fill the frame, you know? And I could actually make it like this and then get my husband to cut it later.
Mm-hmm.
But I kind of like them sticking out. What do you guys think about sticking out?
Mm-hmm.
I like them sticking out.
I like it.
Yeah, I like it too. All right, so I'm gonna do this one. I'm gonna do the greeny one, right? So I kind of have a color palette going on. And I'm gonna do this one with the cardboard, right? So I have a brown and blue one and a green and off-white one, right? And for those of you who have worked with me before, you know I like brown and blue together, and green and cream obviously go together. So these color palettes are trusted, right? This one's kind of light green and has a little bit of gold and a little bit of black, right? So it's like this color green, beige, black, right? And this one's brown and blue. I'm also gonna do just a basic, I think I'm gonna use this big floral one, and I'm gonna just basically do I'm gonna put these little pieces on, I'm gonna cut it up, and then I'm gonna paint each one individually and put that back together. But I could decide to change the composition because I honestly love this photo, but I don't love, or I love most of this photo, but I don't love, this is actually like a sleeve of a lace dress. This is like some of the setups I was doing over the summer. I don't really love how sharp it is. So I tried to take away its sharpness by using sandpaper on it to sort of like fuzz the image after I printed it. But I still think it's just too white and too detailed. So maybe I love this part of the photo. So here I'm just kind of like editing, right? And like, I love this part of the photo. So what if I just picked all my favorite parts of the photo and then I just like put them back together? I don't know. It's kind of an idea. And maybe it doesn't have to
You
make
don't have to put the whole thing back together. You can just put together the parts you want.
That's
Yeah.
exactly what I was thinking. I was like, that's exactly what I'm going to do. And I don't know what it's going to look like because it's not going to be the way I shot it, but I'm going to go for it.
Yeah.
So we're just doing an experiment, right? Now, technically, because I'm using these, if it gets too busy or I get too overwhelmed, I can always put in a blank one, right?
Mhm.
Or I could put in a letter, right? So if I wanted to make, like, I was going to go 3, I was gonna go 3 by 3, so that's 6 pieces. But if I wanted to add 3 more, right, then I could interchange. Do you see what I'm saying? And I can put a blank in there. If it gets too busy or I want to rewrite, because I have plenty of these this size, I have extra, right? So that's kind of a neat idea. I did want to say, just on a side note, that my husband was nice enough to make me bundles. So this is actually what a 16 by 20. Do you see what I'm saying? So these are all the pieces of the puzzle. So I could take a 16 by 20 print or a 16 by 20 collage and then just know that I have the pieces that make that, right? So he made me about 6 of these bundles for me to work on, right? So that would be like, so if you got a 16 by 20 piece of chipboard and got someone to cut it up, they could just put all the pieces back together in a bundle for you and you would know you were ready to go. Does that make sense?
You're lucky to have a husband like that. I do too.
I am very lucky to have a husband like that. But you know what? If he does that preventatively, because he knows that if I'm struggling, I'm gonna have to come to him, and then he's gonna have to help me fix it. No, I actually think he was just like thinking a little bit ahead about how he could prevent like more work for himself down the road. But it is kind of, but like if you were doing it yourself, you could go to Home Depot and you could say, you know, I want to reconstruct a 16 by 20 puzzle. Can you cut these in odd sizes so that if it's, you know, just one piece, put it back together, right? But also organizationally, just by bundling them, I know this is ready to go, right? Okay, so I'm gonna start gluing, and I do a little combo. I've been using like I've actually been combining these 2 glues together just to give me a little bit of extra durability or strength in the glue. And I just feel like, why not? I mean, I kind of used to do that with wax too, where I would just mix 2 waxes that I like together. I mean, I don't see why they don't mix together, and it's going to give me sort of the best of both worlds, right? I just use like a little tray and I just put the glue in here. And then I glue on the back of the paper. I don't put the glue on the wood because I find the wood to be very absorptive. So I put the glue on the paper, and that also gives me the flexibility to change my mind, right? So I can move the paper around. It also gives me a little bit more flexibility on with the paper. So also too, if you feel like you might forget the collage you made, you can take a picture of it, or you can just kind of like set aside the elements. Sometimes what I do is I flip them. So I might take them off like this, you know, in the order that I had them, right? And then put them back together. So it's a lot of just sort of like, in a way, a lot of this work is like mental exercises, right? And if it doesn't go back together exactly the same way, it's like not the end of the world for me. Okay, so I'm gonna glue this paper. This is actually super nice too. Like this is like tracing paper. It's a beautiful, beautiful paper. So I say thinner the papers, the better. I'm not really attracted to thick papers unless I'm using them as sort of like my background or my kind of glue to them type papers. I like the artwork to be on the thinnest paper possible, right? If I've actually tried to put newsprint in my printer and it doesn't work, but the rice paper is thin enough, and then finding these papers like out there in the world is always like really fun, whether you find them like at a thrift shop or, you know, in an old book or something. It's just kind of like finding a little treasure. Okay, so I'm just gonna glue right now. I don't really, Athena, did you glue already? Do you want to share anything? And you guys are welcome to ask questions, or we could talk a little bit too about how to set up your encaustic palette or for tomorrow. We can kind of talk a little bit ahead about tomorrow if you want. Do you have anything you want to share, Athena?
No, I haven't finished, or I haven't started gluing yet, but I'm about there with my collage right now. So
back to you. Here, I'm gonna flip back to Athena. You can see. Let's flip. I'll flip back to Athena. You can see your collage. Oh, nice. Oh, you added a little light yellow and you added some pink.
Yeah. And then I created some more of these sort of like L shapes to kind of repeat what I had going on here. I have black as sort of like my focal point, and then a repetition of some of the pinks and the turquoise colors. So I think I'm pretty close to gluing down.
Now, will you make another arrangement just for comparison, or you feel pretty confident?
So what I've been doing actually is I kind of am okay with what's going on now, but now is when I would want to add some like fun little accent elements. So I'm thinking about, okay, well, I like working in threes. So oftentimes, you know, whichever color I pick, so like maybe it's this green color, maybe I'll try to find another area to add another touch of green. Or maybe I want to use black as my main color, and maybe I'll try to look for little accents of black I can toss in. I might use my hole punch and maybe make some little circles to try to incorporate. So the sort of the main foundation of the collage I think is done, but I might find some little pieces, and I can glue those on top of my paper after this is already glued on. I can sort of go over with another layer and put some small little elements on to kind of just give you some fun focal points and add to the complexity a little bit. But yeah, I think I'm pretty close to being able to start putting glue down. So
I love your little 17 there.
I know, right? This was on a sheet of graph paper, and each page was numbered with these like beautiful stamps. And so I love like tossing in tiny little elements. They almost become like an important focal point. And like Leah was saying, you know, using the handwriting, it's less about, you know, the message that, you know, whatever it's saying, and more just like their little, almost like hieroglyphics or little symbols that are important and can be meaningful maybe to someone, but they could also just be a mark on the paper that adds a little bit more visual interest. So yeah, I like to keep that stuff.
Yeah.
So I think, let me grab my glue, and I might as well just start putting some things down. So I like to just use like little lids from plastic containers to sort of be like a palette. And so sometimes I'll put dab of glue there if I'm going to brush it on. Let me set this. Set it a little bit. So I think I'll start with this big piece, which was the first piece I put down to begin with.
Hold on, Athena's talking. I'm going to put her back.
Mm-hmm.
You're on, girl.
So I would rather use more glue than necessary than not enough. I really want to make sure that these pieces of paper are stuck down really good. So I use a brush then, and I just kind of smooth it out. And yeah, like what Leo was saying, I like to apply the glue right to the paper rather than the wood, because sometimes it soaks into the wood before you have a chance to really get your paper on, and then your bond just isn't going to be very strong. So I'm kind of messy with this. I don't mind if it sort of seeps over the edges, because inevitably that's just going to help seal my edges. And it doesn't have to be super clean, because we're going to put wax over it, and that's going to hide all the little blemishes. Where is my palette knife? So now I'll kind of just move some of these elements off to the side. I know I took a snapshot, so I know where they're going to go. And this way they don't get too messy or in the way. And I'm going to just use my palette knife to sort of smooth all the excess glue out. Let me grab some paper towels. So kind of just smooth and squish the excess out and wipe it off as I go. And so, and depending on like the type of paper you have, especially if you're using these, you know, 100-year-old books, they can be really fragile when they get wet with the glue. So you just kind of have to feel it out and see what your paper wants to do. You might have to be really gentle. I might not want to use the palette knife for everything. Maybe just my fingers. But this piece of paper is actually just an old paper bag, so it's pretty sturdy. So once I have that smoothed,
Oh, go ahead.
Sometimes I'll paint my edges just to make sure that they're really sealed. Sometimes you think you're glued really well, and then when you put wax on it, little loose edges will start to curl up, and then it's really frustrating.
So that glue doesn't resist the wax then?
No, it's actually, it dries kind of sticky, which is good. And then before I put the wax on too, I will go over everything with sandpaper to kind of get all the excess off. You could also use like a damp paper towel to kind of clean it up. Not too wet, otherwise you might damage your paper, but yeah, it combines with the wax really well, I've found.
Okay.
And so inevitably as it dries, find little wrinkles. So I just like to smooth them out. And if you accidentally like scrape your paper, you can go back and repair it with either like a dab of paint that kind of matches the color, or sometimes I'll cut another piece of paper and make a little patch and glue it over top of any areas that got damaged. So I think I'll do these little guys next. And I might kind of put them all in their place first before I press them down too much to make sure my spacing is the way I want it to be.
Athena, does your glue dry clear?
It does, yeah. You can see like a little bit of a residue, more like in the surface texture of it, but it's very clear, yeah. And because it's, let's see, a neutral pH, you shouldn't get any of like the yellowing that you would get with, you know, a non-archival glue. At least I haven't had that happen yet, so knock on wood.
I've been using that stuff for years in framing. It's good stuff.
Yeah, and I know like bookbinders use it. It's pretty stable. And it cleans up with water, and it doesn't have like an odor. I'm really sensitive when it comes to like oils and surfing brine, so I tend to try to stay away from that stuff because it gives me like a headache. So it's a lot of just squishing with my fingers. And so now it's not laying super flat, so that's where I like to go back with my palette knife and just kind of smooth it all down. And again, I'm not really worrying about the mess because it'll dry clear and I can also just wipe it away. And actually the more glue, the better my seal will be, especially for these like tiny little pieces. It's easy to miss or think that they're glued down and then they're not. So now as it's drying, I like to kind of just go back and feel it to make sure I'm not getting any weird little air bubbles. And then I just kind of keep going. So this paper is, it's a handmade paper, so it has a different texture. It's a lot thinner than these other papers that I've been using. So we'll see what happens. You might get a little bit of translucency, but that's kind of part of the fun, the unpredictability. And if it does something you don't like, then it's just kind of a fun challenge to say, okay, well, how do I change it? Do I paint over it? Do I collage over it?
That one's curled up.
Yeah, so this one feels a lot thinner. I'm gonna try to use my palette knife to smooth it, but it might tear it. So we'll see just what happens here. So far, so good.
Athena,
Mm-hmm.
I'm gonna switch for a second.
Yeah, go ahead.
All right, so you guys, it's like 4:22, but I just wanted to show you, I finished this one. So I'm pretty happy with it. And I love this little like random paint. And I guess I had drawn, sometimes I like will draw on my handmade papers, like trace the, I don't know. So it looks like I have a little custom drawing there. So it's kind of nice, these three little marks. It goes back to our black background. So that one's kind of done. This one I decided I was gonna glue. So I actually glued the cardboard onto the wood, right? So it's gonna be like that, right? So it's gonna be, I attached them. So I used the wood glue and I attached the cardboard there. And because I did that, my original composition didn't really work out because I took away a 1/2 inch on the left. So I'm just kind of struggling with these other pieces, but sometimes I, change my mind, right? Like I get right up there and I change my mind. So I'm gonna try to figure out another little grid. I just shorten it because I want to get this white and blue. So I think I'm just gonna shorten it like that, right? So I just shorten these pieces and I want to get this grid going on here. I'm using a foam brush and I'm using my little tray. So I'm just using this little foam brush. And I'm gonna glue that other piece after we go, but it's almost 4:30, so it's 4:24. And I'd love to, maybe Athena and I could both kind of talk about what we're gonna finish up tonight, where we're gonna come in tomorrow, and what our goals are for tomorrow. And I know that I will have these 3 pieces done. I will probably add these photos that I talked about in some way, right? So I'm going to use, and I'm going to make, I find that this is just helpful for the workshop, but it's also helpful for me in my own work, is to sort of use the same photo for a couple weeks or make multiple pieces from the same photo before I switch photos. Okay, because I'm mixing a lot of media here, if I keep like the photo the same and I practice with the same photo for a couple pieces, that helps me. If I get too many options, I get overwhelmed and then I can't really move forward, or I just question myself too much. So I'm going to stick to this photo for all 3 of these pieces that I make wax tomorrow. Okay, and I'm going to have my wax medium, my waxing tools, my torch, some encaustic gesso, right? And I'm going to use pigments. Are you going to use pigments? Oh, you use your craft paint, right, Athena?
Yeah, I don't really keep the paint on the surface of my wax. So I like the craft paint because I'm pretty much gonna cover the whole surface and it'll get really messy and then I wipe it all off. And that's just a lot of wasted oil stick.
Yeah, the plastics are very expensive, right? So
yeah.
I really like the oil stick. I agree with Athena. You could use that. I'm just so used to using them. They're just my chosen source. Any questions? You guys, anything you, I don't know if you want to show your final composition, but these tend to be, I'm going to do this kind of kept with the grid. I definitely can't keep all straight lines though, right? I failed on the straight line test. Which is pretty typical because I know myself and I know that when I draw, I always draw a squiggly line. I don't usually ever draw a straight, right? So I'm a squiggly line and Athena's a straight line. Any questions?
Do you want us to make a collage?
I would love for you guys to make a piece today. Yeah, get off the Zoom and go make some art. My God, yes, that would be amazing.
Cool.
Yeah, and then we could share. I mean, you know, you can always pass. I'm not like super strict or whatever, but you know, wait, you guys, what do you think about this piece here? Do you like this one here or this blue one here? I think there should be another square here though.
I like the blue.
You like the blue?
I like the blue too.
Okay. I love hearing from you guys. I actually last weekend successfully painted. I think I successfully completed a painting because of my workshop attendees. I feel like I need you guys all. I can't paint without you. Aw. All right.
Leah, I had a question about your printer.
Yes, please.
Is it an inkjet or a toner based?
Inkjet.
Oh.
Yep.
And your inks don't bleed on the paper?
Nope.
Nope.
Never. You mean when I paint them with wax?
No. When you know, like when you're gluing or any of that.
Nope. Never.
Mine's inkjet too, and I use it for all of this.
Yeah, I have an inkjet too, and I don't have any problem.
Quality. I mean, I don't know. Maybe because they're dry. Like I tend, you know, maybe give them like overnight to dry or something. I don't know.
Well, I think also
Mine right away.
with the photo printers, they're at least, especially like the Epsons that you guys have, they're the archival photo inks. So versus, you might get some bleeding if you're using just like an office inkjet printer because those aren't as stable as the photo inks. So I think that has probably a lot to do with it too. It's just a little bit more stable and can handle the glue and everything.
I'm gonna quickly do this too. So like what I like to do is I like to do paper tears. So and this is why I also like to use the rice paper. So do you see how I like the stuff to look pretty organic. I could also be using a razor blade, right? And then I can decide though, and after, once I glue this on, if I want to keep this extra flap, right, or I could flip it over and cut it. But I really do love to tear paper, so definitely something I enjoy. I think that's it, you guys. Does anybody have any last minute? You guys could definitely make a collage if you have some wood. If you don't have wood, you know, you can collage onto a heavy cardboard or cardstock. You could any other materials you use? Oh, Athena uses only wood, right?
I've done cardboard before, or even like mat board. If I have like scraps of mat board that don't work for framing anymore, they're like too small, I'll cut them up and I'll use them too. Or like a heavy duty watercolor paper. Just, yeah, look around and see what you have in your studio spaces.
But look how pretty that is, right? Just separating that flower, right? And this torn edge in the middle of the flower, like, right? That's so pretty. And then I can see what else works. You know, like where, like that. It's fun. It's just fun to take stuff apart and put it back together, right? Really fun. All right.
Starting at 1:30 again tomorrow?
Yes, we are. We're gonna start at 1:30, and you can come in a little bit early. Also, if you do make something tonight, you can email me a picture of it, right? And I could put a slideshow together so we can view it on my screen. Or you can always hold it up. I can pin you and you can just hold it up. So you don't feel obligated either way, but it's optional.
Okay.
Okay. Awesome. So I hope everybody has a really nice night. Rest up. We got lots to cover tomorrow. It's all wax from here on in. Wax on. Wax on. Woohoo! All right. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
All right. See you tomorrow.
Bye.
Bye. Bye, everyone. Bye.
Bye.